Welcome to Fractured Reality, where we dive deep into the intersections of technology, philosophy, and the human condition. Today's episode tackles one of the most intriguing questions of our time. Will we ever upload our minds to computers? Let's explore this futuristic concept through science, ethics, and the human experience. I'm your host, Alara Banz. Mind uploading, or whole brain emulation, is the theoretical process of transferring or copying a human mind into a digital form. Imagine living forever in a computer, free from the physical constraints of our mortal bodies. This idea isn't just science fiction, it's a topic discussed by neuroscientists, philosophers, and technologists. Now, to dive deeper into this fascinating topic, I'm handing it over to our speakers, Dr. Cross and Daniel Mercer, who will explore the mind uploading and what it truly means for humanity.
Ton of videos to get through today, from science and tech YouTubers to futurism folks, and even a really popular AI channel. You want to really wrap your head around this whole mind uploading thing, right? Could we actually live forever digitally?
That's the big question, isn't it? The idea of digital immortality is so captivating.
Right. So maybe we should start with why are we even so obsessed with this idea?
Yeah, is it just basic survival instinct kicking in? Wanting to avoid death? Or is there something deeper going on?
That's a good question. Sure, nobody wants to die, right? But I also think there's this drive in us to keep experiencing things, to learn, to connect with people. What if I miss out on something amazing?
I get that. We crave more time, but at the same time, we're kind of scared of what we don't know. And with mind uploading, that unknown is this whole digital world.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. What does mind uploading even involve?
Well, from what I gathered, it's basically a two-step process. First, you got to scan the brain, and then figure out how to run that mind on a computer or something.
Right, because it's not just about copying data, it's about making that data come alive.
Right, exactly. And that's where things get really complex. Think about it. Your brain has 100 billion neurons, each one connected to thousands of others. It's a network of unbelievable complexity.
Way more complex than any computer we have today.
Oh yeah, for sure. The brain operates at what we call the exaflop scale. It's a billion calculations per second.
Wow.
And it does all that using the same amount of energy as a light bulb. To even attempt to capture that, we need scanning technology that's light years ahead of what we have now.
So fMRI scans are basically useless.
Well, they're not totally useless, but they're just not detailed enough. It's like trying to, understand a book by analyzing the ink molecules instead of reading the actual words.
Right. They show activity, but not the fine details.
Exactly. There are some promising techniques being developed, though, optogenetics. It basically makes neurons light up when they're active, so we can see what's happening in real time. And then there's clarity. It makes brain tissue transparent, so you can see the 3D structure of neural networks.
Okay, that's pretty cool. But it still doesn't seem like enough to get every single connection in the brain, does it?
You're right. For that level of detail, we'd need something like electron microscopy. It involves slicing the brain super thin and scanning it with electron beams.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense.
It is. The data generated is just insane. There was this one study where they mapped a tiny part of a mouse brain. It took them 5 microscopes, running for 5 months straight, and generated 2 petabytes of data.
2 petabytes. That's more than most people will ever use in their entire life. And that's just for a tiny piece of a mouse brain. Imagine a human brain.
Yeah, scaling that up is going to be a huge challenge. That's why companies like Nectome are trying to figure out how to preserve brains. The idea is that, maybe we can scan them later when the technology catches up.
Right, though their methods are kind of controversial.
For sure. But let's say we do manage to scan every neuron, every synapse perfectly. The big question then becomes, is that digital copy really you? Or just a super sophisticated clone?
Ah, yeah, the classic ship of Theseus problem.
Exactly. If you replace every part of a ship, is it still the same ship? And if your consciousness is running on a computer instead of your brain, are you still, you?
Some people say that consciousness just emerges from the complexity of the brain, so a perfect simulation of your brain should, in theory, create your consciousness.
Yeah, but others argue that it's not that simple. What about our individual experiences, our memories, our sense of being in the world? Would a digital copy really capture all of that?
That's tricky. We replace all the cells in our body over time, but do we feel like different people than we were years ago? Is there something more, like some essence of us that makes us us?
It's a really deep question, and it makes you wonder, could that essence be transferred to a digital medium? This whole mind uploading thing really challenges our idea of what it means to be a person.
But maybe our sense of self is already more flexible than we realize.
Oh, interesting. How so?
I was reading that our brains develop body maps, which are like neural representations of ourselves, but those maps can actually change. Like a musician's brain map will incorporate their instrument, or someone who spends a lot of time in virtual reality might start to feel like their avatar is part of them.
So you're saying our sense of self isn't fixed, it's constantly evolving?
Exactly. And maybe that's how we'd experience mind uploading. It wouldn't be like a sudden jump into a new body. It would be more of a gradual transition where our brains slowly adapt to this new digital environment and weave it into our sense of self.
That's a fascinating way to think about it. So instead of a digital copy, it's more like a digital evolution?
Right. But now I'm wondering, how would our brains handle having both a physical body and a digital one? Would we be able to switch back and forth seamlessly, or would it be like totally disorienting?
I don't know. Some days I could barely handle checking my email, let alone managing two different bodies.
Haha, right. But this whole idea of mind uploading really makes you think about what self even means. Like, if we could disconnect from our physical bodies for a while, what would that tell us about the core of our being? What makes us, even when we're not in a physical form?
That's a question for the philosophers, maybe. But it also gets really practical, you know? Could we function in a digital world? Would we need, like, simulated senses, virtual bodies? What would that world even look like?
Yeah, that's a whole other can of worms. Maybe we should tackle that in the next part of our deep dive. All right, so we've talked about like the nuts and bolts of actually getting our minds uploaded, but what about the digital world itself? What would it be like to, live as a digital being?
Now that's where things get really interesting. The possibilities are kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, I've seen some wild ideas in these videos, like these massive simulated realities, almost like super advanced video games.
Right. Like, imagine a world where you could design your own avatar, explore countless virtual environments, maybe even create your own worlds.
It'd be like the ultimate sandbox, but wouldn't we get bored after a while? I mean, even the coolest games get old eventually.
That's a good point. One video talked about how these digital environments could be designed to, like, constantly challenge us. Imagine, like, AI systems that create these personalized learning experiences, always pushing you to grow and learn new things.
So instead of getting bored, we'd be constantly engaged and learning. But what about relationships? Could we still have meaningful connections with other people?
I think so. It all comes down to the mindware, the software that's actually running our uploaded minds. Some experts believe we could design mindware that allows for really rich and nuanced social interactions.
So it wouldn't just be like texting each other. We could actually experience the full range of emotions, even if we're not physically together.
Exactly. Some even say we might develop something like telepathy, sharing thoughts and feelings directly. Imagine the potential for empathy and understanding.
Wow, that's pretty deep. But would those digital interactions feel as real as like face-to-face? I mean, there's something special about being physically present with someone.
Yeah, that's hard to say for sure. It probably depends on how our brains adapt. Remember those body maps we talked about? Maybe they could expand to include our digital avatars, so we wouldn't even perceive a difference between physical and virtual interaction.
So we might not even notice that we're interacting with a digital representation of someone.
Right, and who knows, maybe we'd even develop totally new senses and ways of perceiving things in the digital world. Stuff we can't even imagine now.
Whoa, that's crazy. But all this talk about advanced mindware and crazy digital worlds, are we even close to having the technology for any of this?
It's definitely still a long way off. I mean, we talked about how complex brain scanning is, but then you got to build the mindware itself. It has to be like super reliable, secure, adaptable.
And powerful enough to handle millions, billions of interacting minds.
Right. And it'd have to protect our privacy, prevent hacking and manipulation. It's a huge challenge.
So how do you even begin to build something like that? What are the main approaches?
Well, there are a few different ideas out there. One is to basically try to directly emulate the brain, like build a digital replica of its neural networks.
So like building a brain from scratch, but with digital circuits instead of neurons.
Yeah, basically. That might be the most accurate way to capture our cognitive abilities, but it's also super complex and would take a ton of computing power.
What about other approaches?
Another idea is to focus on the brain's functions rather than its physical structure. Like, instead of copying every neuron, we try to figure out the algorithms and processes that give rise to thought, emotion, consciousness.
So instead of copying the hardware, we're trying to crack the code of the software.
Exactly. That might be more efficient, but it requires a much deeper understanding of consciousness than we have now.
It sounds like we're still in the very early stages of all this.
Yeah, for sure. Mindware development is like this cutting-edge field that combines computer science, neuroscience, philosophy. It's really pushing the boundaries of what we know.
It's exciting, but also kind of daunting. But let's say we do figure it out, we crack the code, build the mindware, create these amazing digital worlds. What would that mean for society? How would it change the way we live, work, interact with each other?
Now that's where things get really, really interesting. The societal implications are huge. It's hard to predict exactly what would happen, but we can imagine some possibilities, right?
Definitely. Like one of the videos talked about how mind uploading could make inequality even worse. What if only rich people can afford to upload their minds? You'd have this digital elite living forever while everyone else is still, stuck with regular old mortality.
Yeah, that's a scary thought. It could create this huge social divide, and who knows what kind of conflict that could lead to.
And what about jobs and the economy? If people could potentially live forever digitally, would we even need to work anymore?
That's a tough one. Some experts think that digital immortality could lead to a post-scarcity economy. Like, resources would be so abundant and work would be optional.
Sounds kind of utopian.
Right. But others argue that we'd still need to manage resources, even in a digital world. And there are all sorts of questions about fairness and distribution.
It's like we'd have to invent a whole new economic system, one that works in a world where time and death don't really matter anymore.
Exactly, and this is just scratching the surface. Mind uploading could revolutionize education, healthcare, entertainment. It would touch every aspect of our lives.
It's almost too much to think about.
I know, right? But one thing's for sure, if mind uploading becomes a reality, it's going to change everything about what it means to be human.
It would be like the biggest paradigm shift ever.
Totally. And like any new technology, it has the potential for both amazing things and terrible things.
So we need to start thinking about these implications now, right? So we can make sure we're steering this technology in the right direction.
Absolutely. We need to have these conversations, ask the tough questions, figure out how to make this work for everyone.
Well, that's certainly given us a lot to chew on. Maybe in the next part of our deep dive, we can dig a little deeper into some of these big societal questions. Okay, so we've talked about the tech, the digital worlds, all that stuff, but there's this bigger question looming, right? What does mind uploading mean for humanity itself?
It really makes you rethink some pretty fundamental stuff like life, death, consciousness. Would death even be the same if we could just, upload our minds and keep going?
Right. Would we still mourn someone if we knew their mind was still out there somewhere in a digital world? Would our relationships be totally different?
Our whole concept of mortality would probably change. I mean, imagine your grandparents could keep interacting with their great-great-grandchildren, sharing stories and wisdom across, centuries.
It kind of messes with your sense of time, and legacy. What does it mean to leave your mark on the world if you could potentially live for hundreds, thousands of years?
Yeah, one of the videos talked about how digital immortality could shift our focus from individual achievement to, collective progress. Imagine huge networks of minds, all working together on scientific discoveries, art, solving global problems.
It's like a giant hive mind. But would we still be individuals in that kind of setup? Would we lose our unique perspectives and experiences?
Good question. Some experts think we could design mindware that protects individual autonomy. So you could choose how connected you want to be. You could join these big collaborative networks and go off and do your own thing, whatever suits you.
So you'd have the best of both worlds, access to this huge pool of knowledge and creativity, but you could still be your own person. But here's a thought. If we knew we had, forever, would we even appreciate the present moment anymore?
That's interesting. Maybe at first there would be this feeling that, oh, I have all the time in the world, I can do that later. But I think eventually we'd come to realize that each moment is still precious, whether we have 100 years or 1,000,000.
It's like, how a tourist will rush through a museum trying to see everything, but an art lover will spend hours with just one painting, really soaking it in. Even with unlimited time, it's how we choose to spend it that matters.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that question. What would you want your digital self to be like? What values, memories, dreams would you bring with you?
It makes you think about what's really important. What would you want to carry with you into this new form of existence?
And the answer to those questions are probably as diverse as humanity itself. But the fact that we're even asking them shows how powerful the human spirit is. Our curiosity, our search for meaning, our need to understand ourselves.
This whole deep dive has been a wild ride. We've gone from the science of brain scanning to the philosophy of consciousness and the future of society. Mind uploading, if it ever happens, is going to change everything.
It's a journey into the unknown, exciting and a little scary at the same time.
But we can't just bury our heads in the sand. We have to talk about these things, ask the tough questions, and make sure we're shaping this technology in a way that benefits everyone.
It's our responsibility to guide this technology wisely.
Well said. So, to wrap things up, I'll leave you with this thought. Mind uploading might not just be about living longer. It might be about expanding our consciousness, pushing our boundaries, and redefining what it means to be human.
It's a whole new chapter in the human story.
And we're just at the beginning. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and we'll catch you next time.
Thanks both of you for joining us today. Today's discussion centers around one of the most mind-bending concepts from the series Pantheon: mind uploading. The idea is straightforward, yet profound. What if we could transfer our consciousness into a digital form, existing beyond our physical bodies? In Pantheon, we see this through the character of Maddie, who communicates with her father, David, whose consciousness has been uploaded after his death. David, killed in an accident, has his brain mapped and his memories and personality traits digitized. This digital version of David interacts with the world, specifically with Maddie, through various devices. It's a poignant exploration of grief, identity, and the ethics of digital immortality. But what does this mean for us? Mind uploading, if ever possible, would redefine human identity. Are you still you if your mind exists only in a computer? The series explores this by showing David's struggle with his new existence, questioning his humanity and the authenticity of his emotions. Can we put our brains in computers? Maybe. But it's not just about can we, but should we? It's a big change for what it means to be human. Thanks for listening. I'm Alara. See you next time.